Controlling the senses, an essential subject from Vinipedia. By controlling the senses, or by the process of yoga regulation, one can understand the position of his self, the supersoul, the world and their interrelation. Everything is possible by controlling the senses. Due to deep family affection, we can forget our main duty of controlling the senses and improving our spiritual consciousness. We must learn how to control the senses. This is civilization. To become cats and dogs, that is not civilization. Dog civilization, cat civilization, hog civilization, camel civilization. Unrestricted sense gratification allowed in the name of freedom, that is disastrous. One who is not in K consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail, for the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Srila Prabhupada's books, lectures, conversations and letters offer a comprehensive presentation of this essential subject as seen in the Vinay's Control the Senses category. An introduction from his books is given below in the following 10 quotes. Quotes from Srila Prabhupada's books for a devotee. The process of merging into the Brahman effulgence is considered to be hellish, and yogic power or the preliminary perfection of yogic power, to be able to control the senses, is automatically achieved. As for elevation to higher planets, a devotee considers this to be simply hallucinatory. A devotee's attention is concentrated only upon the eternal loving service of the Lord, and therefore the power of death has no influence over him. In such a devotional state, a perfect yog can attain the status of immortal knowledge and bliss. Armad Bh Gavatam 3.27. 30. Whether one is situated in the forest or at home, if he is engaged in the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, he is a liberated person. For one who has not controlled his senses, going to the forest to become a so-called yog is meaningless. Because his uncontrolled mind and senses are going with him, he cannot achieve anything, even by giving up household life and staying in the forest. Armad Bh Gavatam 5.1. 17. Gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence the senses will be controlled. The mind too absorbed in material activities can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. One should engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord by the different devotional activities of hearing, chanting, etc. If performed under proper guidance, that is the surest path of progress, even for the disturbed mind. Armad Bh Gavatam 2.1. 18. As for this body, what is its value? It is merely a source of various diseases. The so-called philosophers, scientists and politicians know this very well, but nonetheless they aspire for temporary happiness. Happiness is very difficult to obtain, but because they are unable to control their senses, they run after the so-called happiness of the material world and never come to the right conclusion. Armad Bh Gavatam 7.9. 25. The Brahmas, the intelligent men, the administrative men, the mercantile community and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of occupational duties mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. For the intelligent men, controlling the senses is the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence even with a legitimate wife must also be controlled, and thereby family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. Armad Bh Gavatam 1.9. 26. From the very beginning of life, those who are agitendriya, who cannot control their senses, are educated only for sense gratification, as we have seen in the Western countries. Thus the entire duration of a life of even 100 years is wasted and misused, and at the time of death one transmigrates to another body, which may not be human. At the end of 100 years, one who has not acted as a human being in a life of tapasya, austerity and penance, must certainly be embodied again in a body like those of cats, dogs and hogs. Therefore this life of lusty desires and sense gratification is extremely risky. Armad Bh Gavatam 7.6. 8. Prahlada Maharaja was completely cultured as a qualified Brahma, having very good character and being determined to understand the absolute truth. He had full control of his senses and mind. Like the supersoul, he was kind to every living entity and was the best friend of everyone. To respectable persons he acted exactly like a menial servant, to the poor he was like a father, to his equals he was attached like a sympathetic brother, and he considered his teachers, spiritual masters and older godbrothers to be as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ahmad Bh Gavatam 7.4 31-32. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature, against his desires. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own fruitive activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus he is always bewildered, and repeatedly he dies. Ahmad Bh Gavatam 6.1 52. If a person too attached to the duties of family maintenance is unable to control his senses, the core of his heart is immersed in how to accumulate money. Although he knows that one who takes the wealth of others will be punished by the law of the government and by the laws of Yamriya after death, he continues cheating others to acquire money. Ahmad Bh Gavatam 7.6 16. If one engages in devotional service from the beginning of life, he easily attains Virjayaviti, or Asakti, detachment, and becomes Jitendriya, the controller of his senses. One who perfectly engages in devotional service is therefore called Gosvam or SVM, master of the senses. Unless one is master of the senses, he should not accept the renounced order of life, Sanisa. A strong inclination for sense enjoyment is the cause of the material body. Without full knowledge one cannot be unattached to material enjoyment, but as long as one is not in that position one is not fit to return home, back to Godhead. Ahmad Bh Gavatam 7.6 9